Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'"
That's Haman. I will tell you about him later, so let's start from the beginning. In the ancient kingdom of Persia, King Xerxes ruled from his magnificent palace in the capital city of Susa. King Xerxes was a powerful and wealthy ruler, known for his extravagant banquets and lavish displays of wealth. One day, King Xerxes decided to host a grand banquet that would showcase the splendor of his kingdom. The banquet lasted for many days, with food and wine flowing freely, and entertainment provided for the king and his guests. On the final day of the banquet, King Xerxes commanded his queen Vashti to come before him and his guests wearing her royal crown to display her beauty. However, Queen Vashti refused to obey the king's command, which greatly angered King Xerxes. Consulting with his advisors, the king decided to banish Queen Vashti from the palace and to search for a new queen to take her place. A decree was issued throughout the kingdom, inviting young women to come to the palace to be considered as the new queen. Among the young women brought to the palace was Esther, a Jewish orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai. Esther was beautiful and kind, and she found favor in the eyes of Haggai, the king's eunuch in charge of the harem. Haggai provided her with the best cosmetics and food, and he assigned her 7 maids from the palace to attend to her. Esther kept her Jewish heritage a secret, as Mordecai had instructed her not to reveal it. Each young woman underwent a year of beauty treatments before being presented to the king. When Esther's turn came to go to the king, she asked for nothing except what Haggai suggested, showing her humility and wisdom. When King Xerxes saw Esther, he was captivated by her beauty and chose her to be his queen, not knowing her true identity. To celebrate, the king held a great banquet in Esther's honor, and he declared a holiday throughout the empire. Meanwhile, Mordecai, who sat at the king's gate, overheard a plot to assassinate the king. He told Esther, who informed the king in Mordecai's name. The plot was investigated and confirmed, and the conspirators were hanged. Mordecai's actions were recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. As queen, Esther continued to listen to Mordecai's advice, showing her respect and love for her cousin. Among the king's many officials was a man named Haman, who was ambitious and proud. Haman was appointed by the king as his highest official, and he enjoyed great favor and authority in the kingdom. But Haman's heart was filled with arrogance, and he demanded that all the king's servants bow down to him. Now, Mordecai, a Jewish man who served at the king's gate, was a man of integrity and faithfulness, and he refused to bow down to Haman, citing his loyalty to God. This defiance angered Haman, and he began to plot his revenge not only against Mordecai, but against all the Jewish people in the empire. Haman approached King Xerxes with his wicked plan, saying,
"There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all other people, and who do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them."
The king, swayed by Haman's words and unaware of the true identity of the people he was condemning, agreed to Haman's plan. Letters were sent throughout the empire, ordering the destruction of all the Jewish people on a specific day chosen by casting lots, or Purim. The news of the decree spread quickly, and the Jewish people were filled with fear and despair. Mordecai tore his clothes in mourning and went into the city, crying out in anguish. The Jewish people fasted and wept, seeking God's mercy and deliverance. Haman's plot seemed to be succeeding, but unknown to him, God was already at work behind the scenes. His plan would soon be thwarted by the courage and faith of one woman, Queen Esther, who had been placed in her position for such a time as this. Esther, who had become queen of Persia, learned of Mordecai's distress and sent him clothes to replace his torn garments. But Mordecai refused, sending a message to Esther, urging her to go to the king and plead for the lives of her people.
Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?"
Esther was hesitant, knowing the risks involved in approaching the king without being summoned. But Mordecai's words spurred her to action, and she resolved to go to the king, saying,
"Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish."
On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her, and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked,
"What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you."
"If it pleases the king, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him."
"Bring Haman at once, so that we may do what Esther asks."
So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther,
"Now what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted."
"My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question."
Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials.
And that's not all. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate.
His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have a pole set up, reaching to a height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself." This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. "What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this?" the king asked. "Nothing has been done for him," his attendants answered. The king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer courts of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, "Haman is standing in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Now Haman thought to himself, "Who is there that the king would rather honor than me?" So he answered the king,
For the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor."
"Go at once," the king commanded Haman. "Get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." So Haman got the robe and the horse. He led Mordecai on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief, and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked,
Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted.
If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king.
King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing." Esther said, "An adversary and enemy, this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbonah, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. The king issued a new decree allowing the Jewish people to defend themselves against their enemies, and the Jews in Susa were saved from destruction. In the end, the Jewish people were saved from destruction, and Mordecai became a trusted advisor to King Xerxes. The Jews celebrated their deliverance with feasting and joy, and Mordecai instituted the festival of Purim to commemorate their victory. Esther's story is one of courage, faith, and divine providence. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, God is always at work, orchestrating events for the good of his people. Esther's willingness to risk her life for the sake of her people serves as an inspiration to us all, encouraging us to stand firm in our faith and trust in God's plan for our lives.
Hi, I'm Ruth. I come from a faraway land called Moab. Something special happened when I met a kind and wise woman from Bethlehem. This is my story.
In the land of Bethlehem, there lived a woman named Naomi. She, along with her husband and 2 sons, had left their hometown because of a severe famine and had settled in the land of Moab. While in Moab, tragedy struck. Naomi's husband passed away, leaving her a widow. Her 2 sons then married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, and they lived in Moab for about 10 years. But then, another wave of sorrow hit Naomi's life when both of her sons died, leaving her alone with her 2 daughters-in-law. Upon hearing that the famine in Bethlehem had ended, Naomi decided to return to her homeland.
Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband.
Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said,
Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me.
Orpah tearfully bid farewell to Naomi and returned to her people. But Ruth clung to Naomi, refusing to leave her side.
Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God.
Moved by Ruth's loyalty and devotion, Naomi and Ruth embarked on the journey back to Bethlehem together. When they arrived, the whole town buzzed with excitement and curiosity.
Can this be Naomi?
The people whispered, surprised by her return.
Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty.
Naomi and Ruth arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest, a time of new beginnings and hope. In the land of Bethlehem there was a man named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's late husband, Elimelech. One day Ruth said to Naomi,
Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor.
Go ahead, my daughter.
So Ruth went out to the fields to gather grain behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech, Naomi's deceased husband. Boaz arrived and greeted the harvesters, saying,
"The Lord be with you."
"The Lord bless you," they answered. Boaz then asked his overseer,
"Who does that young woman belong to?"
She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She asked me if she could gather grain, and she has been working steadily from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter.
So Boaz approached Ruth and said to her,
"My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled."
At this, Ruth bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him,
Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?
I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. How you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge.
May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my lord. You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants.
At mealtime, Boaz said to Ruth,
"Come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar."
When she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As Ruth got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men.
Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up and don't rebuke her.
So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her,
Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you.
Ruth told her about the one at whose place she had been working.
The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz.
The Lord bless him. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. That man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers.
He even said to me, Stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain.
It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed.
So Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Naomi began to devise a plan to secure a future for Ruth. One day, Naomi said to Ruth,
My daughter, I must find a home for you, where you will be well provided for. Now, Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight, he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do.
Ruth listened to Naomi and went to the threshing floor. She waited until Boaz had finished eating and drinking, and then she went quietly and uncovered his feet and lay down. When Boaz woke up and saw her there, he asked,
Who are you?
I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your covering over me, for you are a guardian redeemer of our family.
The Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning.
So Boaz told Ruth to stay with him that night. And in the morning he went to the town gate to meet with the other relative. When the guardian redeemer came by, Boaz called out to him, gathered 10 of the town's elders, and said to them,
Naomi, who has returned from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these witnesses.
I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it.
He said this after learning he would have to marry Ruth as well. Boaz then said to the elders and all the people present,
You are witnesses today that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses.
We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah.
So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. The Lord blessed her, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi,
Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth.
Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. He was named Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So Ruth and Boaz's union resulted in the birth of Obed, who would become the grandfather of King David, a direct ancestor of Jesus Christ. Thus, Ruth's story became intertwined with the lineage of King David, a testament to her faithfulness, loyalty, and the blessings that come from trusting in the Lord.
I am Job, a man from the land of Uz. Once, my life was filled with blessings beyond measure. This is my journey from prosperity to desolation, and ultimately to restoration by the hand of the Almighty.
There lived a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. And 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. Also, his possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. And his sons would go and feast in their houses, each on his appointed day, and would send and invite their 3 sisters, to eat and drink with them. So it was, when the days of feasting had run their course, that Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said,
It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts.
Thus Job did regularly. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan,
From where do you come?
So Satan answered the Lord and said,
From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it.
Then the Lord said to Satan,
Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?
So Satan answered the Lord and said,
Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now, stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.
And the Lord said to Satan,
Behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person.
So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And a messenger came to Job and said,
The oxen were ploughing, and the donkeys feeding beside them, when the Sabeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you.
While he was still speaking, another also came and said,
The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you.
While he was still speaking, another also came and said,
The Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels and took them away, yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you.
While he was still speaking, another also came and said,
Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you.
Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head. And he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said,
Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
In all this Job did not sin, nor charge God with wrong. Again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan,
From where do you come?
Satan answered the Lord and said,
From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it.
Then the Lord said to Satan,
Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil, and still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause?
So Satan answered the Lord and said,
Skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face.
And the Lord said to Satan,
Behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life.
So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord, and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself, while he sat in the midst of the ashes. Then his wife said to him,
Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die.
But he said to her,
You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity?
In all this Job did not sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. For they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they raised their eyes from afar and did not recognize him, they lifted their voices and wept, and each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head toward heaven. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was very great. Job went through a lot of pain, but he never spoke against the Lord, as his friends and wife did. Sometime later, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, Job's friend,
My wrath is aroused against you and your 2 friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Now therefore, take for yourselves 7 bulls and 7 rams. Go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering. And my servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept him, lest I deal with you according to your folly, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has.
So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamathite went and did as the Lord commanded them, for the Lord had accepted Job. And the Lord restored Job's losses when he prayed for his friends. Indeed, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then all of his brothers, all his sisters, and all those who had been his acquaintances before came to him and ate food with him in his house. And they consoled him and comforted him for all the adversity that the Lord had brought upon him. Each one gave him a piece of silver, and each a ring of gold. Now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he called the name of the first Jemimah, the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Karen-Happuch. In all the land were found no women so beautiful as the daughters of Job, and their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years, and saw his children and grandchildren for 4 generations. So Job died, old and full of days. Job's ultimate restoration shows that suffering is not the end of the story. God is a God of restoration and hope, capable of bringing blessings, even after the darkest times.
During the early days of the church, there lived a man named Stephen. He was a man full of faith and the Holy Spirit, known for his wisdom and his ability to perform miracles in the name of Jesus Christ. Stephen fearlessly proclaimed the gospel, which stirred up the religious leaders of the day. They accused him of blasphemy and brought him before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council.
This man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs which Moses delivered to us.
As Stephen stood before the council, his face shone like that of an angel. He recounted the history of the Jewish people, from Abraham to Moses to David, highlighting their repeated rejection of God's messengers. Filled with the Holy Spirit, Stephen boldly rebuked the council. "You stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears. You always resist the Holy Spirit. As your fathers did, so do you. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who foretold the coming of the Just One, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, who have received the law by the direction of angels and have not kept it." Enraged by his words, the council dragged Stephen out of the city and began to stone him. But even in the midst of the stones raining down upon him, Stephen's gaze was fixed on heaven, where he saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. "Look, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit," Stephen cried out as the stones continued to strike him. And then, echoing the words of his Saviour, he prayed, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." With that, Stephen breathed his last, becoming the first Christian martyr. His death marked a turning point in the spread of Christianity, as persecution scattered the believers, spreading the message of Jesus Christ far and wide. The witnesses laid down their clothes at the feet of a young man named Saul. Though Stephen's life was cut short, his faithfulness and courage inspired countless others to stand firm in their faith, even in the face of persecution. His story reminds us of the cost of discipleship and the power of God's grace to sustain us in the most difficult of circumstances.
This story is about a certain woman named Tabitha, which is translated as Dorcas, who lived in Joppa. This woman was full of good works and charitable deeds, which she did. But it happened in those days that she became sick and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. And since Lydda was near Joppa, and the disciples had heard that Peter was there, they sent 2 men to him, imploring him not to delay in coming to them. Then Peter arose and went with them. When he had come, they brought him to the upper room, and all the widows stood by him weeping, showing the tunics and garments which Dorcas had made while she was with them. But Peter put them all out, and knelt down and prayed. And turning to the body, he said,
"Tabitha, arise."
And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. Then he gave her his hand and lifted her up. And when he had called the saints and widows, he presented her alive. And it became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed on the Lord. Tabitha's story highlights the importance of helping those in need, the power of faith and prayer, and the significant contributions we can make in the church and community. Her resurrection by Peter's prayer underscores God's ability to perform miracles, while her legacy teaches us to strive for a life of service, compassion, and lasting positive influence.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share.